What's going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to another episode of The Sacred Giggle. After a long break, a long hiatus, we are back. As always, this is your host, Shishi, aka Brown Cub, aka Shish Kebab. My guest on the show today is a very, very special friend who I recently met. His name is Gavin Koolmon. He's 1/3 of the superstar DJ, producer, electronic pop trio DISCIPLES, famous for many hit records, including How Deep Is Your Love with Calvin Harris. And since then, he's moved on to all kinds of inspiring ventures, including making music for Wim Hof. And we're going to get into all of that. We're going to talk about Gavin's story, which is one of the most interesting and fascinating and inspiring stories that I've ever heard. We're going to talk about what it was like for him as an artist to experience the level of stardom and fame that he did, what the aftermath of that was like, how he got on his own personal healing journey, how he met Wim Hof, and how he started creating music for Wim. Gavin is truly one of the most interesting and creative and just really cool people that I've met, and I've been so fortunate to get to know him better over the last few months. This is a really, really beautiful conversation full of wisdom, full of insights, and I know it's going to provide a lot of value for you guys out there. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Gavin Koolmon. Last month I was in London for a show and I met up with Gavin, and you just have like a really incredible story that I'm really excited to get into. And it kind of, as we were talking about before when we were offline, kind of inspired me to like re-engage with this podcast, because I just for a while was like, I don't know, I feel like I'm kind of talking about the same stuff. And then when we met and I heard your story, it was just really inspiring, and I think people are going to get a lot of value out of it. So maybe where we can start is, I know that you have just been on tour a little bit again, and I'm curious, I think this will be a cool way to lead into a lot of that story.
Yeah.
How are you doing right now? Like, how has tour been? How are things going?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I think like the way that we tour is like, it's quite seasonal. So we don't, like a lot of DJs just tour constantly. They might have like a little few months break here and there, but they're touring just different places in the world throughout the year. Whereas we might have 8 sort of months off from like summer to summer, where we just do a few shows and then we really get back into it from sort of May. So it can be quite intense. So like the last few weeks I've had a show every week, and you know, I love traveling and I love doing shows, but it does take it out of you when, you know, you've got other stuff to do in the week, and you know, maybe you're, you know, like for example with the Wim Hof stuff that I'm working on, it's not really a project that I can be working on when I'm like too hungover. Right? It takes away from, you know, it takes away from it a little bit. So that has been a little bit tough, but in general, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling happy. We're in London. London right now feels like a tropical island.
Yeah, it's
hot, man. Like
it's really warm.
Yeah, it's like 28 degrees. The sun is shining, so I can't complain, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And I'll link to all this, everything we talk about in the show notes. And for those of you who are fans of dance music, you definitely have heard of the DISCIPLES. And Gavin is a member of the DISCIPLES, 1/3 of the DISCIPLES. And so that's who you've been touring with.
Right,
and,
right.
I want to kind of, maybe that's a good segue to take it all the way back to the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Just walk us through your journey from when you first started DJing in clubs and producing music to how you eventually ended up starting the DISCIPLES, and sort of how that genesis happened.
Right, okay. Well, I mean, I started DJing when I was like 15. But we're going to go right back.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
It all started when my dad met my mom.
yeah, exactly. When I was 5 years old and I heard, no, but I started at 15. That was when I first, like, I got the buzz for like the music industry, you know, not just music, which was more like academic based, which I was into before that. But when I was like 15, I started DJing and I just got really excited about garage music. It was like I lived for it, like, you know, the record shops, Big Apple Records in Croydon every Saturday. And I started DJing on pirate radio. And then my cousins were like nightclub promoters. So from like 15, 16, they kind of took me on and I started playing in and around London and had like residencies at like a lot of like student parties and stuff. But then the garage kind of sound sort of like imploded a little bit and I stopped getting excited about it. And funnily enough, that was actually when I started producing music. So it was at a time where I went to sixth form college. That's when I actually went from DJing to actually working in the music studio. I started it on a music technology course. But at the time, I didn't really know what direction to go in. I knew that I wanted to make music, but I wasn't excited about garage music anymore. At that time, I hadn't really got into house properly yet. So I liked hip hop music. So I was kind of like fusing loads of stuff together. But where I wasn't DJing and like being fueled by new music all the time, I was just playing with a lot of different sounds and directions. And it was really like 3 years later when I left there, took a year out, went to Ibiza, got a little bit of the bug for house music, and then I came back and started at music college and started my production degree there. And that's when I got back into house music. That's when I fell in love with house music, house and electro and techno, and that's when I started DJing again. And that's when me and Deval from DISCIPLES, we then started working together as a production team. So I would be DJing out of the weekends, and in the week after I finished music college, I would be going and me and him would just be working every day, putting together tracks, remixes and stuff like that. And yeah, so it took a little while for that to kind of get into motion and stuff. But I was DJing around and, all around London and stuff at the time, like in that underground house scene. And just, I guess, as it was starting to actually get quite big traction when Ministry of Sound took me on as like a touring DJ. I then ended up actually like losing a little bit of my hearing, right? Like the second gig that I actually did for them, I ended up getting tinnitus and actually like...
And what is tinnitus, just for people who may not know?
Tinnitus is like, it's actually kind of a symptom. You can have it without losing your hearing, but it's a symptom of having hearing loss, where it's like a high-pitched sort of like screaming in your ears that a lot of people get after like nightclubs and stuff, or like maybe even after DJing. But normally it goes away. But you can get chronic tinnitus is when you lose quite a bit of hearing and then the tinnitus doesn't really, it stays. So you then have to learn how to deal with it. So
for people who may, like, if you've ever been to a club and you leave and it's just like that high pitch.
Yeah.
In the case of chronic tinnitus, it's just always there.
It's constantly there, right? Yeah. And it kind of, it's not just about it is the screaming in your ears, but also it makes you very unbalanced. So, yeah, I got like vertigo, like I started feeling sick. I was kind of like in bed for like three weeks to a month at that point because my body was just sort of reacting to it. And at that point, I went to a doctor. I spent all the money that I'd earned from these DJ gigs going to like a private doctor. And after we did all the tests, and he was like, "You need to just stop DJing, because if you don't stop DJing now, within the next year or 2 years, you're gonna lose like the majority of your hearing at this rate."
Wow.
Which obviously is not something that you want to hear
Yeah.
when your DJ career is just starting to take off. So that was a big blow. That was a big blow for me to kind of, not only was I going through the motions of like accepting that I'm going to have screaming in my ears for the rest of my life, I'm also now thinking that the only thing I actually do want to do, I can't do anymore. Yeah. Right. So that was a tough time. But yeah, after a little while, my body did start to, I kind of found a way to listen past it in a way. And there's nothing else in the world that I can do apart from music. So I was never going to stop doing it. But it's just, at that point, I didn't know if it was even feasible for me to do it. But I just kept on, and I stopped sort of like being in nightclubs as much.
Can you talk a little bit more about when you say I found a way to listen past it? If you can remember, like, what was that process like? Because I can imagine you go to a doctor who's, basically the medical expert telling you that this is like a permanent thing and like you're not, and then Yeah, what was the internal process for you to actually find a way to listen past it? Like, what did that mean for you?
Well, it was hard because I think for the first few years, like it would be like, even if I was in a bar, like let alone in a club, even if I was like in a pub, and there's just like background noise, like people like talking loud and shouting, it would rile up my tinnitus to the point where I would feel like out of balance for maybe a week afterwards, more than I was already. But I think after a while, I think my how do I explain it? My mind started to just adjust to it. So it wasn't affecting me as negatively after a while. I just started kind of like being able to sort of, maybe it was just like being able to deal with the uncomfort,
Right.
or you know, or what it made me feel like for those weeks afterwards. But I think, yeah, I don't know, man. It's quite a hard one to pinpoint how I managed to sort of like carry on, like moving past it. But I think it was a natural thing where my mind just started to adjust. But I guess also maybe a little bit of like detachment, which is similar to what you do during meditation.
Right.
Right. But at the time, I didn't know I was doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you kind of, I mean, it's amazing. Just, I feel like humans in general we're just very adaptable, you know, like we just kind of adapt to whatever the situation is. And it sounds like there's a bit of a leading question, because it sounds like you were maybe implementing some of the principles that you may have learned about later in meditation, of just like equanimity and being with what is and finding ways to just adapt to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. No, now on the head, really. I think it was that. But as I said at the time, I didn't know what it was. Looking back on it now,
Right.
it is, yeah, that makes a lot more sense. But yeah, it was a way of sort of detaching from the sound, which it's like because initially it's like you felt like you were the sound.
Right.
And I guess it was a way of separating from that. So you were able then to not be affected as negatively by it.
Right.
But yeah, similar to meditation, man.
Yeah, like basically just identifying less with it.
Identifying less with
and
it.
Creating more of like a witness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like treating the ringing like you would treat your ego.
Right. right. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So that's.
You know what I mean? So like just detaching, or your mind, you know, if you want to call it. So yeah, I think that kind of was what it was. And I think, again, like meditation, the more that happens, the more you build up that muscle.
Right.
And I think that's what happened to me. And I was able to get to a point where I was like ready to go again, you know? But it wasn't until, so it's quite a long-winded answer to what your initial question was, but it wasn't until then I started doing pop music for quite a long time. As I said, like I was working with like Flow Rider and Pitbull and all of those types of people, and like Pussycat Dolls.
And was that the pop music, the pivot, let's say, into pop music, was that partially facilitated by the fact that you were being mindful about not spending as much time in clubs? Like, was that influencing you going more in that direction?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was. Yeah, because whereas before I may not always be making music that I was going to play in the clubs, but that was the world that I was in. Right. So it's like I'm searching for music and playing out music that I'm in love with.
Right.
And it was very much influenced by the club sound and the club scene, and where I wasn't as attached to that anymore, it made more sense to kind of go down that route. But again, I was doing it for the wrong reasons, you know. Like I don't really like, you know, no offense to Flow Rider and then or Pitbull, but it's not the type of music that I listen to.
Right.
And you could hear that in the end product, you know.
What do you mean by that? Like,
well, you could hear that it wasn't authentic to me. I was making it because it was a route that made sense to obviously my ears and stuff, and also I probably latched onto the more money side of it, or the more money goal at that point, rather than the goal of making music that I love, because that, as I said, that was fueled by the club scene. So I was kind of working with a sound that, yeah, as I said, I was kind of looking more at the getting as much success as possible.
Right.
by working with these people, and that made sense to be working with whilst I was working with those people. But in the end, like, you know, a lot of situations never sort of turned out the way that they were supposed to, and I ended up kind of like getting a little bit lost after a while, because I had then been working kind of hitting a brick wall for so long, because although I was working with all these big names I'm talking about, you know, sometimes the songs didn't end up getting released, or sometimes, you know, another track gets chosen over your one, and then in the end, you know, you're still sitting in your bedroom in your mum's house with no money, you know, for the third year in a row.
Right.
And it kind of like, after like I was about to have so this is at a point where like Flo Rida and Pitbull were the two biggest selling artists in the world at this point, right? And Flo Rida just released a tune called Good Feeling. It's a global #1. And I had found my way into a situation where I was working with them, produced a track with both of them, and it was about to get released as their next single. And if that had happened, and I'd put all my eggs in that basket, right? So it's like, if that was going to happen, then, you know, I was going to get all this money and whatever else, and my career would have been elevated. And then in the end, they just made the decision to go with another tune. Which is normal for them, you know. It's like, but that, like, then everything around me, because I just like put everything on this one situation, you know, the publishers stopped answering my phone calls, managers stopped returning my emails, and I had no money, and I was just sitting at home, and I was just like, what the fuck, man? Like, I can't keep doing this, man. Like, I can't keep putting myself through this.
Right.
And, you know, I was even thinking about getting a job and just quitting music, to be fair. And then I was like, it's been a few years now. Maybe I should start trying to get back into music that I really love. Like, fuck the tinnitus kind of thing. So I started getting excited about this deep house sound that was out at the time. And that was giving me the sort of, like, you know, the excitement I was getting when I was DJing Garage back when I was 15, 16 years old. Started to get that back.
Right.
And then I started to create a project, and then the managers started coming back. The publishers started to come back. And that was the time when I started to work again with Deval. Deval had found Luke and was working with him as an artist at the time. And then we all started working together. Initially, it was just going to be like, we'd all write for each other's artist projects. And my one, we did first, because I had all my beats kind of all ready to go. So we went and like wrote loads of songs and stuff like that. And then in the end, like, we got like a record deal. I got like a record deal, small record deal, but like a label who wanted to release my EP at that point in time. And I was just like, do you know what? It doesn't even feel like it's my EP anymore.
Because of the collaboration.
Yeah, it feels like it feels like it's not about me, it's about all of us.
Right.
So then it's just like, I called up Nathan and Lucas said, rather than trying to disjoint it too much, should we just make it one thing? Like Disciples, rather than trying to be like this production act. What about if we are just Disciples?
Yeah. Beautiful.
Like a Disclosure or a Rudiment or whatever. And they were like, yeah, sounds good.
That's beautiful, man. It reminds me of the quote, you can go fast alone and you can go far together. Like
100%.
It's a beautiful quote. And I'm going through a similar thing with my project Behave right now.
Right.
And where, you know, it started with me just sending beats to my partner Aditya, who's the vocalist in Behave. And then he sent stuff back, and like, when we both heard what it sounded like with us together, it just sounded like a whole new thing. Like, this doesn't make sense for it to be like Shishi featuring Aditya Rao, or even a collab. It's like, this should be like a whole new project. And I don't know if you felt this, but it's kind of liberating as an artist, because it just becomes less about you, and it's like, you feel like you're part of something bigger. And so like, it's, the creative process is like a little less, for me, it's been a little less contaminated by like my ego, because it's like,
I was just about to say that. Yeah.
It's like, there has to be, in our case, in your case, 3 people, in our case, 2 people need to sign off on it. And Rick Rubin has this quote that I love, which is, he's like, whenever I'm working with an artist, until everybody is like 1,000% excited about it, it's not finished.
Right.
And that's a high bar, but it's like
a high bar.
It's, as I'm sure you know, but it's like, it's a beautiful process. And I'm curious, actually, for when you were in that phase where you're writing all those songs, this was before you had a brand or like anything like that of like an idea that it's going to be a project. It sounds like that only happened once the label was expressing interest. Did you like, because I guess I'm a little curious personally, because I'm kind of going through something with my new project right now where like we want to write a lot of songs, but we're also like, how are we going to tell our story? Like, what are we going to do? And there's a part of me that intuitively wants to just forget about all that for a time and just first just like make the music and then like worry about that. And I'm curious, like from what I'm gathering, it sounds like you guys, before there was any plan of it being Disciples or anything, like it sounds like you just had a period where you were just making music and really like enjoying that process. Or were you also at the time thinking more strategically of like, what is this sound? Or
no, not at all. It definitely was and that's why it worked. And that may be why it took so long throughout our careers, all three of our careers, to get to that point, because it was a little bit of alignment. And there definitely wasn't a thought process of, okay, so we need to become this and we are the ones who are going to drive this sound. There was none of that. It was just that we all had like a similar understanding of dance music, and we all liked the same types of sounds and songs and frequencies and all that kind of shit. So it was just natural what we were doing. So there wasn't strategically any thought process behind it. I think at some point, which is why it worked, I think. And I think that's why, like Chris, big up Chris Ruhan. He's a good friend of mine, but also the A&R who first sort of like bought into us as an act. And he signed our first EP and helped build our brand, like the logo and everything. And he kind of saw that we had something before anyone else did. And I think what he saw was the fact that it was kind of natural, because he's quite good at that. Do you know what I mean?
I totally know. This is such an important point, because I just feel like it's, like I feel like we live in this day and age where I just hear so many people putting so much emphasis on your brand and telling your story, as they should. Like, those are all really important. But I just feel like so many artists, and I fall into this too, that's why it's like so refreshing to hear this story. We don't give ourselves enough space to just like not know what's going to happen and just enjoy the process of creating and just playing and treating it like with that childlike enthusiasm of just like, let's just see where this goes and let's just enjoy and express ourselves, because that's what this is all about, before rushing to try to figure out like how we're going to market it and all that stuff. And it's cool to hear from someone where this project ended up becoming really successful, that like that's the genesis. And like when you say that it wouldn't have worked otherwise, like that's it's really inspiring.
Yeah, man, it wouldn't have worked. And I mean that's not to say that that's for everyone though. That's one thing I have seen as we have gone through the motions in the music industry. There are some people who are more strategic with it and it works for them.
Right.
But maybe not so much in the earlier stages of their career, but for the longevity, they've found the formula to the madness. Do you know what I mean? And they can keep recreating it.
Is there an example that comes to mind that you can think of that's more, and why they are that way? Like it's more.
You mean like
just like like an artist that kind of fits what you just described. In your opinion.
Well, who is there? I think I mean, someone who's had like the longevity of what I'm talking about is Calvin Harris, right?
Yeah.
Who we've obviously worked with a lot, and I'm signed to his publishing company. So I mean, he's kind of the epitome of being able to find a method to the madness, right?
Yeah.
Because he everything that he does, like he to me is probably one of the best producers of our generation. He's one that you're going to put with Quincy Jones and those level of producers. Like he's on another level mentally.
What is it about him? Why is that, in your opinion, as someone who knows him and has worked with him? Like, what?
I mean, he's I don't know why it is. I know that he's very fucking driven. He's very talented. Like most, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of dance producers at that level really don't do that much apart from A&R and orchestrate, which is fine.
Right.
You know,
They're
like
running a business.
They're running a
like
business,
an
and
executive,
and it's not to say that they haven't all
Right.
produced, but he plays all the instruments. Like he mixes stuff.
He's really incredible, and his live streams are like, or his stuff he posts on Instagram. You're right, like he's just literally, he posted this thing on how he made Slide, and he played all the parts himself, and it's also crazy because he keeps switching up his style and finding a way to like make it work, you know. And so it's very, it's interesting that you use him as an example of the strategic mindset, because I almost feel like he kind of has both.
That's what I mean, and that's something which is very hard to find. That's why you find most people don't have long careers like that, right? Because you have your moment, maybe, you know, where that sort of flow has its point to connect with the fucking audience and the universe, right? And then maybe that moves on to something else. So whereas someone like him, he's able to have that flow, that mentality and talent, and then also the sort of, I don't know if it's strategic, but it's just, I don't know, man. Maybe he's an alien. He's possible. I don't know.
I feel like Skrillex comes to mind too, in a way, as someone who's like that. Yeah. Like, I feel like whenever I see his interviews, it just seems like he's just a child, like playing. Like he just has such a playful mentality to music, but then everything that he makes is also just so good. It's just like so good, and somehow is like influencing culture in a way where it's like, but it doesn't feel strategic. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm like just looking at him with like rose-colored glasses as an artist, but it feels less like he's like thinking about like what is going to be the next hot thing, and more just like doing what he feels. And
definitely.
It happens to keep being like really. Yeah,
this is what I mean when I say strategic. I don't mean chasing something that's happening. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, when I say strategic, I mean more of the finding the method to the madness. But what that is, I don't know.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, sometimes it's a natural thing that they don't even know.
Right.
You know? It's just a way that they're wired and the way that it works. So it's not just about, you know, sending out and flowing.
Right.
Completely. There is something else that goes on to have their careers span over such a long period of time.
Right.
But I think, Skrillex is another one, man, where like you think of where he started to where he is now. It's insane, and he's at the top of his game now.
Oh, dude, I mean, it's crazy because his music that he's making now is so different, but it's still, you can hear the influence in all of his different evolutions. You hear just like
his sound,
the whole culture copying it. Like, first he did like his like dubstep, bro step thing. That created a whole movement. Then like the Jack U, like that little bloop, like snare thing that everybody was using after that.
Yeah.
And now it's like his drums are just, it seems like, and Calvin too in a way, because a lot of his like newer, like funky stuff, I feel like the whole radio is like full of that now, you know?
Yeah, they're both tastemakers, right?
Yeah.
And when they put something out that connects, it influences the whole scene.
Yeah.
It's like I was saying this to Calvin the other day. I was just like, I love the fact that you put out your last tune, Miracle, because it has elevated the scene. And not only just pushing that trance or whatever you want to call it sound forward, it's also pushing forward a style of music and like bringing emotion back into dance music, you know?
Totally.
And that's going to be a knock-on effect.
Yeah.
And I can see what's coming with it. So I was just like, I love that you do that, because you don't have to, you know. Sometimes you get to a certain level, you could just go and do another pop song, man, and not really, you know, just get the views and stuff like that. But I love people like him and Skrillex and Diplo as well.
Yeah, for
sure. Where they want to push forward the music industry and the scene, which is helpful for us all, you know.
Yeah.
But just going back to what you were asking about before. During that initial period of Disciples, we definitely were, it was like, there wasn't so much thinking about anything, but there was later on down the line. When we got signed to a major label, like Pete Tong signed us, and that was part of a major label system, right? Like Warner Records and stuff. We didn't know at that point what we should be making. So we kind of was like, okay, cool. So we need to make pop songs.
Right.
And we went in the studio for like a month and just try to make the biggest pop song possible. And we're going in with all these pop songwriters, and of course, you know, major labels love to hear that. They want to hear that you're in the studio making pop songs, because that's what they associate with money.
Right.
And I think for that whole month, we didn't use one of the songs in the end.
Wow.
But the one song that was kind of going back to the roots of what we did before, which we made right at the end of that 4-week stint, was a track called They Don't Know.
Yeah.
Right. And that was the only track we used out of that whole the 4 weeks of writing, when we were trying to find the next major label release.
Amazing.
So we were thinking about it too much, and then kind of went back to what was originally who we were, and that was then what worked.
And do you think there's any reason that They Don't Know happened later in the process of that period of time? Was there any sort of like, kind of like just, okay, like getting tired of trying to make a pop song, and maybe something about that was more pure and seeped out later, when the part of you that was like trying to make something, you know, like with this goal, was maybe a little more tired, or do you think it's just a coincidence that it just happened later in the process? Like,
I think that one, because if I think back to it, I think we might have even like wrote How Deep Is Your Love in that period. Yeah, I'm just trying to remember if it what writing point that we did, because that's relevant to what you just said, How Deep Is Your Love, and how that came about. With They Don't Know, that was just kind of natural. I don't think that there was much like reason to that, really, because I don't think we even knew that what we were doing was wrong with writing all the pop music. We just didn't know what we were supposed to be doing, because we'd never been signed to a major before. And then just Deval came up with the bass line with the drums that we had already had, which are kind of like my drums, and we had already used them in previous tracks. It just flowed. And to be honest, I didn't think it was going to be the one that we were going to use. It's just that, like, luckily our A&Rs at the time, like, they listened to all of the music and just said, that's the one. And not only is that the one, that we got to mix that tomorrow and put it out by next week.
Wow.
So they heard that. Like, I didn't actually hear it, to be honest with you. But the more relevant one to what your question was How Deep. And I don't remember if it was that exact period of time. It would make sense that it was. But I remember being so sick and tired of spending every day like working with these like pop songwriters that were just too far gone pop for what we were, that we were being put in with by, you know, I'm not blaming anyone. Like, no one knew what they were doing at the time. We didn't have a sound at that point in time, but I was just like, this music's just not going to work. Like, I just like it's, and I'm literally spending from morning till night every fucking day. And I just got so frustrated that like I woke up one day and I was like, I've got to go in the fucking studio and do this again. Oh shit, man. And I thought, okay, rather than moaning about it, let me think, how can I help make this work?
Right.
So I then went through all of the music that I love, like songs, like pop or not.
Right.
And a lot of it was like some of the older house stuff, the older trance stuff, like Rudy Silver Touch Me in the Morning and Everything But the Girl Missing and all of that sort of stuff. And even going back to like Nirvana.
Right.
And fucking like Alanis Morissette. And I just got my head into all of that, into that mode. And that day we were in the studio with Ina, who wrote How Deep Is Your Love. And just out of that frustration, like, I was just like, look, guys, can I just play some, like, let's just get on the level here. Let's just get our heads into gear, like, rather than just sitting down and writing another pop song that sounds like something on the radio.
Right.
And I just started going into, like, even like playing like Book of Shade and shit like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, man. And it just happened that all of us were like kind of just synced up on it. And even Ina, who didn't really write dance music at the time, she was like, I fucking love this shit. I just didn't know that I was allowed to write it.
Wow. Oh wow, that's super dope.
So then that kind of like spawned, like, then Deval started playing the boom 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 boom, and then it just flowed, like, like literally. Then I put a drum loop in, and then Ina just, it's like she didn't even think about it. She was just like, okay, I'm ready, and just sang it, and that ended up becoming the one pop song that we did use.
That's so epic, man. Like gives me goosebumps. Like, yeah, because that song is so, it's very spiritual, like
Yeah.
spiritual in the sense of the lyrics are really, I think, just a few layers deeper than your typical pop song.
Yeah.
Although it can be received at different levels of consciousness, which I think is like what makes a great pop song.
Yeah.
Is like the person can make of it where they are, you know?
Yeah.
And like that song definitely has that quality. And then there's just the instrumental also is really deep. Why do you think she said that? Like, what about it? Do you think she was like, oh, I didn't know I'm allowed to write to this? I think that's like a really interesting statement.
I don't know if that, I don't know if she said that I'm not allowed to, but it's like, I guess especially during that period of time, it was like everyone was just trying to make pop music, right? So it was like trying to formulate the song that was going to do well. And people don't always think about those tracks and songs as references to songs that are going to do well in the charts.
Right.
Or especially at that time anyway. None of that sound was on the radio.
That sound meaning like this deep house informed,
but also like trance and emotive songs, which
right.
was what got me into dance songs, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess it just wasn't a reference for her.
Right.
She's like, oh, I would listen to it,
right.
but I never really thought to kind of write it. If I'm remembering that properly, so it was along the lines of that.
Yeah.
And it just happened that she's, Ina's amazing. Like Ina's an amazing songwriter, like different level.
So how did Calvin get involved with that song?
So we had They Don't Know out, and that was doing well. It was doing well in Ibiza and stuff, and then we re-released it like a major label release, and it got onto like Radio 1 A-list and stuff like that. I think a lot of people were like, how the fuck is this song? Like, it's like a deep house. Like, it had no elements of what anything else was on that playlist.
Right.
Like, but it's on the playlist. So I think it pricked up a lot of people's ears. Like, who the fuck are these guys? Like,
right.
So I think Calvin obviously heard it and he was into it. And me and Luke from Disciples our publishing was unsigned. And Calvin had a publishing company, was running one. And yes, he got in contact about working together on that and signing us, and he ended up signing me and Luke. So that was how our relationship kind of started.
Right.
And then, so we had the bare bones of How Deep Is Your Love? And I remember, like, just as I had signed to him, I think it was like a month or a month and a half later, we had done the re-release of They Don't Know. Was it the re-release? No, sorry, it wasn't the re-release, but we were doing like a promo week for something, and we were at the Brits and doing all this like crazy stuff, which was mind-blowing for us at the time, right?
Right.
And then Calvin was there, so that was the first time I met him, and he was like, oh, look, I'm in the studio. Like, I'm going back to LA tomorrow, but I'm in the studio, so like, let's send some stuff back and forth. And you can imagine for a producer to hear that from Calvin.
Yeah,
it's
crazy.
Like, I was like...
That's so epic.
Normally what I would do, what I had done up until that point, is I'll just rap all of my beats, all of the songs that we had done, and just send it over. And that was my method before,
right?
Which probably didn't work very well. So, but this time I thought, let me just not send anything until I'm sure it's the one for me, like something that gives me that feeling, so then I can know that it's the right, like I'm pushing the right.
You're not trying to just like send everything and hope that he likes something. It's more just like, no, let me like check in with myself first and be like, what am I actually excited about? And
so like you're kind of A&Ring it. Right. Well, just something that gives you that feeling, right? Yeah. And then we were working on How Deep. We had the song, and I was like, let me send this to him. So I sent it to him, and then that was the beginning of the process. That we then started producing it together. And
beautiful.
Yeah. And the rest is history, really.
Yeah, well, that's maybe a good pivoting point, because the rest, the story just keeps getting more interesting from there. So that song comes out eventually.
Yeah.
And I mean, just like walk us through what happens next. How does your life change? And, because that's a moment that I think so many, obviously musicians, but just creatives, artists in general, to have someone at the top of your field, whatever it is, verify and co-sign you like that and actually collaborate with you is probably a huge moment. So what happens in your life after that? How do things change? And maybe we can use that as like a segue into the next part of this conversation.
how does it change? Probably quite drastically. I think that from the moment that we started producing the track together, I think it was only like 2 to 3 months before it was like globally released, which is quite quick.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Fast.
Like, that's a pretty crazy turnaround. And yeah, it went crazy. Like when we released that track, it was, I think we released it in August, and I just remember from August until like December, it was just like a whirlwind of like America tours and fucking God knows what else. We're just all over the place doing promo, just trying to make the most of the moment.
Right.
Kind of, I guess, having been flung into the limelight a little bit, we're playing catch up with ourselves a little bit as well, like I know it was definitely something that I wasn't used to, just like being even like known to, like friends and family from my area. They were like, it's just, they're hearing me on the radio, they might see me on music TV and stuff, and it was just kind of a weird thing to deal with, because they then don't know how to, I don't know how to explain it. It can sometimes change the way that they view you, especially if they've not seen you for a little while, but nothing has actually really changed.
Right.
Do you understand what I mean?
Within the personal dynamic, it's still the same relationship.
It's still the same relationship. So that can sometimes create problems, but I think just the limelight in general was it was a fun time, but it took a little bit of adjusting. And I know we had spoken about this before as well, so it's the kind of like the last part of that like promo run was us performing on Jimmy Fallon in New York, which is like one of the biggest shows in America, right?
Yeah,
prime time shows.
Yeah, it's definitely like especially for artists to perform there, I feel like it's like a big checkbox, for like big pop artists.
Yeah, and especially for us we weren't big pop artists,
right?
It was, I think it was Calvin's first time doing a TV performance, and it was our first time doing a lot of things. And then we came back home, we had Christmas with our families, and then we went back out to LA in January to try and write the next song, because we didn't have that.
Right.
we had the bare bones of what it became, but we didn't know that then. And I just remember then being in LA and just sitting there, and just like my mind was just going so crazy from the last 6 months, and I was just like, this moment here is kind of like what I've been working towards for the last like 6 years of my life. Like to create a song like How Deep Is Your Love that does kind of like lives in both worlds of commercial and still kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like that was something I kind of always wanted to accomplish with someone like Calvin, of course, is fucking amazing. And I was like, shit, but I don't feel any different. I was like, but like, I don't feel like all of the problems, like, because you kind of think that once you get to a certain point, that all the issues that you rack up until that point, which can be a lot, because it's a hard industry, man. It builds up a lot of insecurity.
Being a human is a hard industry.
Being human is hard as well. And then,
but yeah, the music industry is also hard.
Yeah. So you kind of realize that that's not. It just kind of was like, okay, that was the beginning of me like being drawn to like meditation. Like I'd always known about meditation and stuff before through my dad, because my dad was into it a lot when I was younger and has been, and he ended up being like a big teacher for me like a year later after that. But I didn't understand it,
Yeah.
But it was then where I just started getting more drawn to like connecting with myself and like, cause like where does happiness lie? If it doesn't lie in this like world that in the heights of top 10 records, which was where I'd got to, and where the fuck does it lie? Because so then I started like looking a bit more within. You know what I mean?
So is it fair to say that it sounds a bit like there was an expectation maybe of happiness or fulfillment or a resolution of past issues that was kind of being pinned to this future event? Like if this happens, then that will mean that all of those other things were worth it, or like I'll be okay in these areas that I'm still not feeling okay in.
Yeah.
And then that happens, and I'm sure it felt great.
Yeah.
But maybe that expectation maybe wasn't fully fulfilled.
Yeah. I mean, there wasn't much awareness going on at that point in time. So it's like, but yeah, I guess all of the sort of like insecurities that you have that just made, I guess for me, probably made up my personality. It still does now. I'm not some like healed person or like some sort of guru, but I am working through my things now. But I think then you just have this thought process that, this, once I get there or get that, then this feeling inside me will kind of go away. Or all of a sudden you just feel, I guess, peace, which is what we're all looking for, right? So you kind of think that that's going to bring you that peace without knowing that that's what you're searching for. So as I said, there's not much awareness around it. It just made me think like, and let me not downplay it though. Like, it was an amazing time of my life, and it was an amazing time, and even carrying on past that point, it even got more amazing. Like, it was, I enjoyed it, and I still do enjoy it. But that was a pivotal moment for me, where it just made me start looking at things a different way.
What did that moment and that achievement bring you that you feel like has really had a lasting positive impact on your life? And it could be external things in terms of like opening you to new opportunities, or maybe even more interestingly, maybe is like internally, like, has there been something that it's brought you, or has it just really been like, no, that was cool, but like it actually just invited me to look into how to find that peace in a more internal way?
Yeah, I think it was just, it invited me to do that. It just gave me a want and a need to, and then through that I saw what it can do.
Right.
So like that LA stint, I think we were out there for a month or something, right? We were still partying. We were in the studio, running around LA, having the time of our lives, right? We had just had like a hit single.
Right.
So it was amazing. But I'd wake up in the morning and do 40 minutes meditation every morning and every night. Even if I was coming back from a nightclub or coming back from the studio late, I would do 45 minutes meditation before I went to bed. So just the sort of like the want to do that, the need for it maybe then gave me a little bit more. You see what can come from it, it changes your perspective on life when you start doing those kind of things regularly. So I think it was just an opening to it.
And what do you think was giving you that level of discipline? Because it's pretty amazing.
Well, that's what I mean.
Was it just because you felt like, okay, I'm having all these insane experiences, I need something to stay grounded? Like, did it feel like that? Or was it just like a curiosity of it? Or just because I feel like, to go from not really having much of an interest in that, or maybe like, that your dad's into it, but you're not really as curious or whatever. And then you're like, that's a pretty dedicated practice, like 45 minutes in the morning, 45 minutes in the evening.
Excuse me. Yeah. I don't know how long that, it is. And I think it might have made it easier because I was out of my normal environment. We were in an apartment in LA, like everything was new at that point. So maybe implementing new things was easier because of that.
Right. Yeah.
But honestly, this is what I mean. It's just, I wasn't planning to do that. I just, for whatever reason, started to out of interest and kind of got hooked. And it was kind of showing me a different perspective, which was what I needed at that point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And what kind of meditation were you practicing at that time?
It was like a guided meditation, How do I explain what type of meditation it was? I don't know. It wasn't like transcendental meditation. It was just,
is it like mindfulness of the breath, or watching your thoughts, or
it was quite a detailed guided meditation specifically about like space and energy in the universe, and in a way it was a little bit cheesy because it was someone had given it to me,
right,
who was actually in the music industry as well. So yeah, I don't know what type of meditation it was. It was just it was very specifically guided,
right.
Though. And I guess it was about awareness, opening up the sort of mind and detaching from your thoughts But I don't know how much more. I don't know what type it was though. To be honest, yeah.
But that was your way in a way to this new world of looking. Let's just say simplify it, looking within.
Yeah.
For the answers to some of these age-old questions of like, how do I find sustainable peace and joy?
Yeah. As I said, I just got drawn to it. I remember like even like we would be in the studio. Where our studio was in LA is in Santa Monica, and it's quite a big like, I don't know if you want to call it hippie, but like kind of like Buddhist hippie type of scene down there by the beach. So there's loads of like little shops and stuff, like Buddhist shops and stuff. And I would just go in there and just like speak to the person who works in there and ask them about meditation. It's like, how do I do it, kind of thing. And I remember like just doing stuff like that whilst I was walking to pick up lunch from the studio. It just became something that I was attracted to.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but yeah, those meditations I was doing were definitely opened the door.
So let's pivot to, from that point, when do you start becoming aware of breath work and Wim Hof? And walk me through like when that happened in your life, and then how you got to eventually meet him and start working with him all the way to what you're doing now.
Okay.
Big, multifaceted.
No, I don't know. It's not even that much of a detailed question. It's just I'm trying to like chronologically put it together of how it all happened. And I guess that I was always aware of Wim and his methods and stuff. Him being the Iceman and having climbed Mount Everest in his shorts and his crazy stuff that he had done, but I didn't know, I'd never practiced his techniques. And you know, even though like I went through that period of time in LA, that's not to say that I carried that on for the next 2 years, by the way. Do you know what I mean? Like it was very much an up and down sort of thing, but I knew what that was then, you know, and I could kind of bring myself back to it. But don't get it twisted, I was still going off the rails at certain points, partying and, you know, on tours doing the opposite of meditation. You know, to be honest, but I would always try and bring myself back down, and I knew what that place was, kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, you had a reference experience.
Yeah, I had a reference point for it. But yeah, so I mean, one of the points was that made me aware of Wim was actually like an accident that I went through. I told you about before, right, briefly, and it was kind of like my girlfriend was in a car accident, and I ended up punching through the windscreen. While she was trapped in the car, and that idea that sort of experience that I went through kind of made me interested more into the Wim stuff, right?
So you were not in the car, right? Your girlfriend was driving alone.
Yeah.
And she gets in a car crash.
Yep. She gets in a car crash. She flips the car over. It was near where I used to live. But it was on a country road late at night, and she flipped the car over into a ditch, right? Now, she happened to get her phone and she was conscious, and she called me. And she happened to remember the road that she was on, which was pretty crazy because it was not the most random country road, but it's not. I wouldn't have imagined that she would have paid attention to that. She remembered the name of the road, called me in a frantic state, obviously, saying, "I've just crashed. I'm here," and I'm not too far down the road at this point, and I'm trying to like thinking, what the fuck's going on? Not really knowing what to expect when I get there. So I've just driven down the road, and as I'm driving down this country road, I'm seeing like a flicker of light in the distance, and I'm thinking, no, that can't be. And as I'm getting closer, I'm realizing that flicker is a flame, and then as I'm getting more closer, I'm realizing that's her car flipped over on fire.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So I then pull over by the car, and at this point the bonnet's on fire, right? The bonnet's on fire, so I then run down from my car and jump onto the car, and you can't. Like, she's trapped in the car, basically, right? You can't open the doors. Like, there was nothing inside for her to smash the windows. So I just started just fucking trying to do anything that I could, like pick up logs and shit. I was just trying to smash the car to open it up.
And so the actual door to open the car, it wouldn't open because the car's upside down and it's like
yeah. Well, it was on its side, but like kind of tipped.
Got it.
But for whatever reason, the door was lodged,
right.
So it couldn't open. So there was we're just trying everything. But at this point, the flames now are getting like big, and
right.
obviously, car on fire at some point, it's gonna blow up, right?
Right.
So I was just trying everything to get inside the car, and then it got to a point where I was like screaming for help, really, if I'm honest. Like, and then like loads of cars had pulled over by this point, but no one would come to help because obviously their car's gonna blow up at some point, right? So they're just like, sorry, like we're gonna call the ambulance and the fire engine, but we can't.
and you're just right there.
I'm on top of the car with the flame up my
and
arse.
She's inside, probably she's just like freaking out.
Yeah. So then at that point, I was like, I either run back to my car to try and find something to smash it, like a jack or like a fucking window smasher. But I'm thinking, by the time I get to my car, open my boot, try and find something and come back, this car might blow up. So at that point, it was just a bit of something kind of happened, like, and I just like, my brain just sort of like clicked. It's really weird. And I just like, I just started pounding the windscreen. So I just started punching the windscreen like as hard as I could, and just punching
front of the car.
So I'm on top of the windscreen, and I'm just hitting it from the side, and I'm just punching, and I'm not. Yeah, it's like at that point in time, because I didn't go to my car, I just, for that moment, now I look back on it, it's like I just accepted whatever was going to happen was going to happen. And that's a weird thing, right? It's like you're just letting go.
Yeah.
So it's like you're letting go. So you're not worrying now what's going to happen. You're just there. So you've got to find a fucking way to get.
And you're just punching the windshield with your bare hand.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. So you're like, I mean, this might be hard to remember, but like, are you feeling pain? Or are you just, the adrenaline is so high in that moment that you're just like, single-mindedly like I need to break through this.
I couldn't feel anything at that point. But I was punching, and then it got to a point where like my knuckles were out, so I've got all my knuckles were out, so my bones, and but I couldn't feel anything at that point.
Like the skin is off.
The skin's off, all the bones are out, and then my tendons had all like broken or like snapped, so I couldn't make a fist anymore. And then I just started using my left hand, which is weak. Like, I'm not someone who goes to the gym or like, I'd go to the gym sometimes, but I'm not someone who you would think would be able to do that.
Right.
Especially with their left hand. I just started punching with the left hand. And again, at that point, the flames were getting so big, and having not successfully done it with my right hand, it's like even more then I kind of just dropped into like, just being like, nothing else was there. Nothing else mattered. I was just there, focused on that one point. And I was like, I accepted that. Yeah, cool. We might die here, but I'm not going to let that happen. So I guess it was the when I started using my left hand, I then decided that no, I'm not going to let this happen. I'm not going to let that. So anyway, the same thing started happening with this. Like my knuckle came out, but with like the last little bit that I had, I popped the windscreen off and then pulled it off.
And so it didn't shatter. It came off, and then you were able to.
Yeah. It didn't shatter. It just sort of like it cracked, and then like we were able to just sort of pull it off. So then, long story short, get her out of the car.
And your hands are probably like bleeding, just
totally
they're
just gushing. Yeah. And then I get her out. We roll down the hill. And then, like, literally, it's probably a matter of seconds afterwards, the car just goes...
Jesus Christ.
It was mad.
That is so insane. Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. It was pretty crazy. And then after that, you know, look, at the end of the day, in my mind, I wasn't really paying attention to what the trauma of that situation or whatever. It's like, we've got out of it now.
Yeah, like you accomplished the goal. Which
is
to
not even accomplished. I'm just like, oh, we'll, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't really think about it too much. I was just happy that we were out.
Right.
And yeah, and then I had to go into surgery the next day, and like they had to restructure my hands and stuff like that. But the point of all of this is that through that, like, it just made me think like what you can do when you're forced to do it, forced to get into a certain state, right? When you're forced to get to just to connect to the moment where there's no choice but to fully get in there.
Yeah,
is pretty crazy, right?
Just one more question on that. Like when you're in that moment, because I want to, I know this is like, we'll get into, but like, are you feeling, and maybe it's hard to remember, but are you feeling fear? Like, what is the emotional landscape inside? Are you just not even in that state because you're just so focused? Or if you can remember, like when you made that decision, it sounds like there's just a click that happened.
Yeah.
Does the fear subside because you're so focused, or are you working with the fear? Like,
it's like the fear goes because you're not what you're. It's like you're not then worrying about the outcome.
Right.
You're just so like focused on that one thing that you're not worried about the outcome, so you can't fear. Like, and it's fear, and it's like the more the fear went, the more sort of, I guess, power was in that moment, I guess, you know what I mean? So yeah,
Right.
like, it wasn't, the fear went for a period of time, which also was weird to me.
Yeah, that's so wild. I mean, it must be just probably hard to describe.
Yeah, it's quite hard to describe.
Yeah.
So there's just that all was quite of a weird crazy situation that then that then led me on to, because you know Wim speaks a lot about the power of the mind and how that connects to spirituality, how that connects to meditation, you know, because they are somewhat different things, but all very, very connected.
Yeah. And your story reminds me a little bit of, I mean, you know him personally and much better than, I've never met him, but your story reminds me, I remember when I was first getting into his stuff and the cold exposure and the breath work.
Yeah.
I was researching him and I listened to some podcasts, and he's told the story of getting trapped under the ice, and the way you were describing like that click where it's just like, okay, I'm just single-mindedly focused on getting out of here or whatever it might be. Yeah. It sounds similar.
Yeah, that's what I guess that kind of. I mean, it's not like Wim Hof levels of like of situations here, like, but I guess that's what resonated with me.
Yeah,
right? I had heard him speak about that, and it was just like, what was that kind of thing? Like, what the fuck just happened?
Right.
So that made me interested in him, right? But it was later on down the line where I actually properly started practicing his techniques and then went on to meet him. Right. So that actually that was when I started to kind of like study what he was on and what he was about and and what he had done. But it wasn't until later on down the line where I kind of like that situation happened when we had just, it's funny how these things work out, because that was, I think it might have been the same week that we had put out our single On My Mind, which was one of our most successful singles, right? Yeah. So I remember after my operation, being at home with my hands all like in plaster and shit, and we were number 1 on iTunes. Like, so it was a very crazy time and experience. But then once I had kind of healed my hands, I went back on tour. And I just didn't really speak about the situation that much. I never spoke about it in interviews and stuff because it wasn't something that me and my girlfriend at the time wanted to do, like open up to. Right. Our PR team probably wanted me to talk about it. Right. But I just went back to normal life, you know? Yeah. So I was interested in Wim, but then I didn't have a need to practice his techniques yet. That came a bit later. Yeah.
What facilitated that?
So that was probably, I don't know if it was like 2 years later, a year later. I went through a time, like really bad anxiety and depression, like fucking just overwhelming anxiety and depression that I had never experienced before. And it kind of was like forcing me to face my ego a little bit, like not a little bit, a lot.
Yeah. What do you think brought that on?
Well, I think it was
in retrospect.
Yeah, I mean, it was during a time where I'd broken up with my ex-girlfriend. I think that was a trigger.
Okay.
And I think once that was triggered, it didn't really matter what the reason behind it was. I was then kind of facing myself at that point, in like I was facing myself, facing my ego, and it was a period of like depression and anxiety, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I went to therapy, I tried all these different things, but nothing worked. Like nothing nothing worked. Like my dad, that was when me and my dad kind of like, as I said, my dad's like a spirit. He's kind of like he's very spiritual. He knows about meditation, and he kind of became my spiritual teacher a little bit. He was like, okay, cool. He knew, he saw what I was going through and was like, just come to my house. Yeah. And he just kind of like gave me a crash course in meditation and over the space of like a month, and that kind of, so yeah, that depression was like a catalyst to start really searching though, not just actually meditating a bit or getting a little bit into Wim Hof's story.
Right.
Then I was like, okay, I have to find a way out of this now.
Yeah. It was no longer just like an intellectual curiosity.
You're right.
Right.
Yeah. And then I started practicing Wim stuff with the ice and the breathing. After doing some more research on his stuff, because as I said, nothing was really working, and that worked for me. That kind of got me out of a bad place. And I think it's different strokes for different folks, like different things work for different people. That definitely worked for me, and I think it works for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing in your story too is that it sounds like there was a bit of a shift from intellectually understanding things and kind of like having a cursory curiosity about things to actually like fully putting your body into the experience.
Right.
And that seems to be the thing, because even with therapy, I mean, I don't know what kind of therapy you were doing, but so much therapy out there, like just traditional talk therapy, it's still very much at the level of the mind.
Yeah.
And so much of the like deep reasons that, like you said, I don't think we need to fully consciously figure everything out, but so much of the deep reasons for anxiety and depression are below the surface. They're like stored in the body and they're subconscious. And I think the beautiful thing about Wim Hof stuff, his method and the cold exposure and breathing, which has been around for millennia, like in the East and that whole thousands of years, that whole sort of like way of dealing with things is that it doesn't matter like what your mind is doing. Like it's actually operating at a deep bodily level. And so like maybe that's kind of that was the next step deeper that you needed to go to really like experience change.
Yeah, definitely. I guess, that's the like the breath work kind of brings you to that deeper level, right? And that deeper level is then past the depression of which is happening in your mind, really,
Right.
It's chemical and it's a reaction to certain things which are happening in your body, but the breath work brings you to a place where you can detach from it, which is not easy, because when you got like fucked up depression and fucked up anxiety and someone says just go and meditate,
right,
it's like it's the hardest thing to do, right? To sit there and just switch your mind off. Your mind's going 1,000,000 miles an hour. With Wim stuff, it's like you're forced into it in a way, the breath work brings you to there without you having to sort of like consciously do it in a way,
Right.
And the same with the ice baths and stuff. So I think that was really helpful for me, rather than having to rely on like teaching myself to meditation whilst being in a mentally not a good space.
Right.
This was forcing me to that point.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and then I got into Wim stuff then, and then I went to go and train with him, where at one of his like retreats, like a small, like he does these small retreats over in Holland, and it's just like a lot of stuff that he says and that he's gone through, and that his understanding of life resonated with my story, and of course his techniques really helped me. And those 2 days, we kind of like the breath work and the ice that you do with 2 days training with Wim personally, you kind of get to a little bit of a different state, where you can start to really heal trauma and get you experience this is spiritual experience, you know.
Yeah.
I think you know what I mean, because you've got to there through different things, right?
Yeah, well, I think maybe what I'm hearing you touching on is just the power of a good teacher, and then the power of being personally in the presence of that teacher. And it's not that Wim is like the magical answer, but it's like doing the work with the teacher where they're very personally there with you and can guide you. I think that has a big impact as opposed to just like, you know, being in your room doing it by yourself.
Right, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that can really like supercharge it. Like
it can do, but I don't want to make it like you have to do that,
right?
Because it's like it's not about Wim really, right. It's about the techniques.
Yeah,
I think, you know.
Yeah,
I think he'd say the same things.
I think any good like teacher would say that, you know. It's like if be skeptical of like any guru or teacher that's like
it doesn't say that,
making it about them.
Yeah, well, definitely, sure. And there are a lot of nutcases out there that do that.
Yeah,
but yeah, so trained with him, and then afterwards, like, I wouldn't say coming out of that, because that then started a new process in my life of having to like look at myself, and
right?
Like, yeah. You know what I mean? Like I'm still going through now.
I really appreciate you saying that and just the honesty about the. Like, I love the way that you're explaining your story and your process, because it just feels very real. And it's funny because like often on podcasts too, in particular, you hear people and they're like, and then like after that moment, everything was different.
Yeah.
And it's like your story is like very relatable, because it's like you're like having these ridiculously insane experiences, some like horrifically negative experiences, and then like really beautiful, positive healing experiences and great success and highs and lows. It's cool to hear you describe how it was no like one experience that was like, and then I was like a different person. It's just everything is like a process. And like what you just said of like, that just opened the door. And then I went on this new journey. And like, I think that's such a real, I think that's really how it actually works.
Yeah.
Regardless of what we hear on podcasts a lot of the time.
Well, I think a lot of the time people make a point of their points in their life,
right?
Because it's more
poetic, and
more poetic.
We all want to hear like
people want to hear the crazy
like
stories.
The hero of our own journey.
Yeah, and it sells.
It sells, yeah.
But so that opened. As I said, that period of depression that I went through, it changed my perspective. It put me on another journey, you know, or I don't know, elevated the journey, whatever the fuck you want to call it. But yeah, it wasn't a thing of, okay, now I've done this and I'm healed. Like it was just like, okay, now I'm understanding things more. I'm understanding what the layers of this shit's about, kind of thing.
Right.
And you know what it takes to kind of heal yourself. What is healing?
Right.
Like what is trauma?
Right.
You know, how do you get to the point of healing your trauma? And, you know, the trauma that you hold within your body, the trauma that you hold within your DNA is the reason a lot of the time behind your depression and your anxiety and all of these things that you mentally go through. So understanding that you can get to that point through these techniques of not just Wim stuff, but like however you want to get there to kind of heal them.
Yeah, totally.
Right? So I opened up that door to that, and I kind of went off on my journey of that. But I knew that after having sort of like done that and doing the techniques a little bit and having some sort of a platform, I was like, I want to work with Wim and his brand a little bit. Like, so I was trying to think of like how to do it. And initially I was like, why don't I'll do like a documentary where I'll take some music industry people and then go and train with him or whatever. I had a few ideas that I spoke to them about. Nothing really clicked. And then like, this sounds kind of cheesy, but I was meditating one day in the first lockdown that we had, right?
Right.
I was meditating and it just came to me, like, it probably just like shit cleared out of my brain, and it's just like, this is the most obvious thing. Why did you not think of this? It's like, you make music. Those guys are really into music. There's a power of healing within music. You know that.
Right.
So why don't you try and explore that with them?
Yeah.
So I came up with this idea of doing a music project with Wim.
Beautiful.
So then when I finished meditating, I emailed them, and by the next morning we were in motion.
I love that story so much, because I feel like that's an example of, in the Bhagavad Gita, which is like an ancient Hindu text, they talk about like taking actions that are in line with your dharma, like your purpose or your reason for being, and how like in this world there's so much activity, and that there's a difference between activity and action. Yeah. And activity is just like keeping yourself busy, looking around to what other people are doing, and trying to stay on the hamster wheel and trying to stay in the rat race and trying to keep up. And I feel like especially in our industry, like every industry, but especially industries where fame is involved and marketing yourself is involved, it's so easy to get into that and just keep yourself busy. But what you're describing is like you were meditating and you really got to this place of clear space where this inspired idea was able to bubble up out of your awareness. And then you acted on that. And that's like, I would say that's like an example of an inspired action that's actually in line with your dharma, that isn't coming from you trying to like be someone else or do this because someone else did it. It was a purely like inspired thing. And maybe that's why it resonated and immediately got put into action, because the universe was waiting for that idea to come through you.
Yeah. Definitely. I think there's definitely elements of that, just because of how, like, literally I sent the email at midnight and I woke up at 7 and we were in motion. And by the way, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I didn't know what it was supposed to sound like, or I didn't know even the proper concept at that point. So I was like, oh shit, like, what am I going to do now? But yeah, so there was elements of alignment and ideas coming from another place and stuff, definitely. But also there's a simplicity to it as well.
Right.
Like through the meditation, what are you doing? You're just shutting your mind up.
Yeah.
just shutting that fucking monkey mind, which is like complicating everything and making you overthink and taking you in different directions. And obviously maybe I'd been meditating for a little bit and I slapped it hard enough and it was clear. So then it was like, oh, why was I even thinking about going in these directions? It's just obvious that this is the thing to do, you know?
And were there other things that you were working on at that time that you kind of, once you had this insight and this started getting put into motion, disengaged with or like stopped doing? Or
so, well, because it was lockdown, right? It was so I guess I mean my thing was disciples, like, right. My thing still is disciples, but I mean but it was at a time like lockdown was happening, so as time was going on, we were realizing that our summer's now not going to happen, right? So normally we go on tour from April or whatever, and then we have residencies in Ibiza, and it was like that wasn't happening. So all of a sudden now I've actually got the time to invest into other things. So it wasn't so much a conscious thing of stopping. I didn't really have a choice.
Yeah.
And I was able then, I ended up then going to, like, as soon as the airports opened, like me and Wim's son, Anam, who like kind of built the whole Wim Hof method and is a massive sort of like driving force behind all of it. We were speaking and he plays the hangpan, right? You know the hangpan?
Yep.
So we had been speaking like throughout lockdown about the projects and stuff. And as soon as the airports opened, or like the borders opened, it probably was like May, end of May. And he was like, oh, I'm going to go to Spain. Like, I'm going to go and like go to my house in Spain, or I've got like family and stuff going out there. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to jump on a flight and just go to Ibiza as soon as I can. Just get out of this craziness.
Right.
And I mentioned like, maybe I'll stop off on the way, kind of joking. And he was like, you up for it? I was like, yeah, I kind of am. Yeah. So then me and my friend Alpa, who's like my spiritual brother, like we're both just spiritual weirdos, but we jumped on a flight and then went to Barcelona, and then ended up going and hanging out with like Anam, his son, and sort of the rest of the family to go and record in play. And that was the beginning of the project that then took another few years to actually happen. Because I went out there, but in the end, like Anam, like he actually ended up like breaking his arm on the first day that we got there, and he ended up having to go into hospital. And then we ended up like, me and Alpa ended up hanging out with the family, and they kind of looked after us, and we did loads of activities like canyoning and abseiling down fucking mountains where I shit myself, man. It was like, I've never done that sort of stuff before, like when it's just a rope and like a lock
Right.
And it's all, and again, that's great, like teaching yourself to be in the moment, because if you're not, you could die, man.
You're like fucked.
Yeah. So, but of course, not maybe not that extreme, but it's like, yeah, they're doing all of those kind of stuff, and they really looked after us. But yeah, the point being is that we didn't record anything in the end. Me and my friend ended up just staying out in Barcelona for a few months. But that was the beginning of that project.
Beautiful, man.
Yeah.
And I think we can probably wrap soon, but maybe before we do, what's the state of the project now? Like, where is it at? What are you working on? What's exciting you about it now? And and then I guess if there's anything right now to report, like, is there somewhere people can check it out or something people can look out for? Where's the Wim Hof music world at right now?
Yeah. Cool. So okay. So the concept of it is like I'm keeping it simple. It's like music to shut off the thinking mind, you know, like all the stuff we've just been talking about. You can kind of simplify it to that in a way, you know, like not all of it, but it is about detaching and shutting off the thinking mind and using music and certain frequencies and intention behind the music and the words to help people do that. Is the concept. And I've just finished going out to Amsterdam to record Ainam, his son, and Tahir, who's one of Wim's friends, who's an amazing composer and guitarist. Amazing. And I recorded those guys for 2 days. So I'm going to start layering things up. So we're still putting it together, but we're going to put out the first tune this summer.
Beautiful.
So yeah, it's just my Instagram probably be underneath this.
I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, exactly. So just
I'll be talking. What is it gonna, like, if people were to look for that? What would they type into, like, Spotify, for example?
What's that?
For the name of the project or the artist listed?
Well, it's not out yet. That's what I'm saying. So I'll be talking more about it on my Instagram.
Cool.
As soon as there's more information about when it's going to be actually available. But yeah, and there's also like a podcast on a conversation with me and Wim talking about it as well that will come with it. So yeah, just watch out on my Instagram for it.
Amazing.
If it resonates with you, yeah, man.
Is there anything you feel like we didn't cover that's in this moment feeling important to share?
Do you know what? Maybe this one thing is just like what I was saying about intention behind music. Me and you had spoken about that during our first conversation.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like really excited about what you're doing with Bahé and also your own artist project, because I feel like that's what you're doing. You're putting intention behind music through the style of the sounds and the style of the singing, and kind of doing a similar thing to what I'm doing with the Wim thing, right?
For sure.
Yeah. I guess that's kind of where it resonates, and I think that you know, with all of what's going on with like AI and stuff, music's going to become a lot more formulated now. You can type in some words and have Eminem rapping the shit that sounds just like Eminem. That's going to have a knock-on effect on how people make music and how people are able to make money from music, and it's going to saturate things. I don't mean that everyone's going to do AI, but it is going to have an impact. And I think what's going to shine through and what AI can't do is create music with intention. And I feel like that is what will stand out, whether that is pop music, whether that is more spiritually style stuff that like what we're doing, whatever it may be, but putting love and intention into your music, I think will shine through in time to come.
I couldn't agree more, man. And it's funny, like it's funny. We do have a lot of. It's crazy because this is only the second time we've met or hung out, but I feel like you're a brother for sure. Like, I feel like we were meant to meet, and as soon as I remember the first time we met a month ago here in London, you said that kind of tagline of like, it's music to shut off the thinking mind. And I was like, wow, that's crazy, because with Bahé, our like one liner is dance music for the spirit, which is very similar. Very similar. I think going back to the thing you said about AI, like I'm trying to make music that is communicating with the part of human beings that like cannot be replicated by a computer or by a machine. The part that I don't even know how to explain and I don't have words for, but the part that it's like to be someone, like the awareness, the consciousness. And I think in your same way, like music to shut off the thinking mind, that is for people that have struggled with that, you know, which is every human being. Like, you know, and it's like, and so I think there is something really beautiful about that intention coming from a deeply human place.
Yes.
And like, and for me, it's just like, as I get older, I realize like throughout my life, all of my favorite songs and all of the like movies and anything that's ever really truly spoken to me in a lasting way, there's always been some element of like, the reason it's spoken to me is it's speaking to the human part of me that is seeking that deeper feeling of peace and fulfillment. And that's always been my intention as an artist, is like, if I could just make one song that can like have that impact on another human being, then it's like, you know, life well spent. Even if I have to, like, it's like, that's the whole thing. And I think it doesn't matter what the genre is. Like, I think if that's your intention, it will shine through, whether you're making pop music or heavy metal or like dance or whatever. And I like this idea of Trojan horsing spiritual awakening.
That's what. I like that. I remember you said that.
Like this, the Trojan horsing spiritual awakening and emotional healing through like catchy, accessible music. You know, because there's a lot of like new age music out there, or like spirit music that is like very obviously presenting itself as spiritual. And that's beautiful. And I listen to it. I have a whole playlist for like medicine music when I'm doing like my like spiritual nerd stuff that I do. And that's great. But I've always felt that music, there's always going to be some subset of the population that just won't even turn that on. Because they're like, well, I'm not like into that, or it's like, I'm not spiritual.
It throws them off because it's like,
because of the way it's presented.
Too like spiritual, too whatever.
Totally.
So you're saying have it presented in a...
like just have it presented in a way where you're not throwing people off, and let the music have the impact you know, that it's like meant to have. And like all of my favorite songs are like that. Like they're not trying to be this or that. They're just like, it's just a human being like just being so fucking real and raw about his or her experience.
Right.
And that's what connects. So I'm super excited to hear what both of us do, but I'm really excited to hear this track and where this goes. And I feel very excited knowing that a figure like Wim, has such an impact on so many people, the musical part of his journey and expression is in your hands. Like that makes me feel really, not to put pressure on you. I feel very excited about that. So yeah, man, it's been an honor to have you on the podcast. Thank you, this is the first episode after a while. So it's cool. Like I feel this conversation has motivated me to get back into the swing of it too. So man, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. Much appreciated. And yeah, I'm sure that we're gonna do some stuff together in the future. We don't really know what the fuck yet, but
yeah, that's the beauty of it.
That's the beauty of it. So
yeah,
but yeah, man. Thanks for having me, bro.
Appreciate you, man.
Much love, bro. Much love.
I have a final question. I just remembered that I like to ask guests.
Yeah,
and it can be whatever. It doesn't have to be a deep answer, but whatever comes to mind. What in life makes you feel the most free?
What in life makes me feel the most free? Vodka. No, I'm playing. I'm joking. I'm just joking.
Amazing.
What makes me feel the most free? Is getting to that space. It's getting to that space away from your mind. Like, whatever you want to call it, I'm reluctant to put words on it because it kind of throws people off, or it might throw people off, but it's just like getting to that state of like centeredness and oneness in a way, of peace, you know. That's what makes me feel free.
Yeah.
And that, to be honest with you, a lot of the time I get there through breath work, and that brings me back to the center. Because sometimes, you know, your mind can go, you're running around and your mind just going so crazy, just pulling you in different directions. It's just coming back to that place, which is basically peace and freeness. So anything that I can use to get there. But breath work is definitely something which has been hugely beneficial to me.
Yeah, man. Beautiful.
Yeah, man.
Gavin, we did it.
Thank you all so much for tuning into that episode with Gavin Kool. Make sure that you check out everything that we talked about in the show notes so that you can learn more about him, follow him on his beautiful and spectacular journey that he's on. And if you liked the show, if you enjoyed this episode, as always, go ahead and follow the show. Leave us a rating, leave us a review. It means a lot, helps us move up further so more people can get access to these amazing conversations. And I will see you guys soon with the next episode. Much love.